Let's turn to the IRS targeting of conservatives, groups with the name Tea Party or Patriot or 912 in their name. Employees in the Cincinnati office who've been interviewed by a House committee are telling conflicting stories as to whether this was generated in Cincinnati or whether it came from higher-ups in the IRS in Washington. There's so far no evidence, no hard evidence of any involvement by Treasury or the White House, at least so far. As someone who's been around this town a while, what do you make of the IRS scandal?
I think it's one of the worst abuses of power imaginable when you think of the power of the IRS. And it clearly was used for political purposes, to go after a particular category of organization. Happened to be conservatives, my side of the political spectrum. But regardless of who it was, that is the kind of gross abuse of power that everybody's legitimately concerned about. I think that I have trouble believing two guys in Cincinnati dreamed this scheme up. I just don't think that's true. I don't often talk about it, but I was involved in the wage price control program back in the Nixon years. I was the director of operations of the Cost of Living Council. And one of the things I had to oversee were 3,000 IRS agents who were out trying to enforce wage price controls. It was a very professional organization. They worked hard to take the rules and regulations written by the Cost of Living Council and the policy types and implement them out in the field. I have trouble, it was a long time ago, but I have trouble believing that the professionalism that I had observed in that organization would be doing that. Some guys on their own, picking out a political class to go after, that they would do that without doing...
Mrs. Cheney's giving you a call.
Yeah, right.
That's the first time on Fox News Sunday.
But that they would do a example like we've seen here with respect to the way they've operated. And I think that I personally believe I cannot conceive of a situation in which it didn't come from higher up.
The other scandal now is the Justice Department raising the possibility of prosecuting Fox News's James Rosen for his role in revealing what seems to have been national security classified information. Back in 2006, I love the way you're checking to see.
Turning it off.
Oh, I thought you were checking to see who was calling.
I want to make sure it didn't go off again.
I hope it's not another Sunday show. No problem. No. Back in 2006, there were reports that you raised the possibility of prosecuting a New York Times reporter, James Rosen, not Rosen, but James Rosen, for breaking the story that the Bush administration had ordered and was engaged in warrantless wiretaps. First, is that true? Did you consider the prosecution of James Rosen of the New York Times? And secondly, what is your general philosophy about whether or not reporters can, should, are liable for criminal prosecution for exposing national security secrets?
Yeah. I was not advocating prosecuting Rosen. I did think that the New York Times violated the law because there is indeed a provision of law that says it's a felony offense to publish information about communications intelligence in the United States. It's never been enforced, but it's a felony calling for a sentence of 10 years to do that. Now, nobody's
prosecuted the New York Times?
I urge that we ought to investigate, and either the law is the law or it isn't. Now, it's never been enforced. Nobody ever had the nerve to actually go after the New York Times, and but it's on the books. And I thought in this case, obviously, that admittedly, I'm a hard rock on some of these things, and it's probably wise that others said, no, we don't want to go prosecute the New York Times. But there is a provision of law. It's very clear. It's publication of communications intelligence, and it's never been enforced.
But you think it should be?
Well, either that or take it off the books. But it wasn't aimed at the reporter. It was specifically the New York Times had been asked by the President of the United States with the publisher and the editor and the Washington bureau chief in the Oval Office as he asked them, please not to publish this. It's going to do enormous damage to our national security. And they went ahead and did it anyway.